Monterey Bay, where we reside here at K-Squid, is home to lots of surfers, lots of swimmers, and great white sharks who are predators. The top one, in fact, down in the ocean. Surfers know this, and so do swimmers. And recently, sadly, we lost a local swimmer, Erika Fox, to a shark attack. It's one of a very few that has happened, a fatality. There have been bites. Usually they just taste their victims and spit them out. But in this case, not so much. We want to start out by simply saying how sorry we are to hear of the death of Erika Fox and her family. So our condolences here at K-Squid go out to you. I am joined now by Dr. David Ebert. He is with Shark Research Organization and the Moss Landing Marine Lab, as well as San Jose State University. He's an expert in shark biology, and thank you for joining us here on Talk of the Bay.
No, thank you for having me.
So, yeah, there's nothing more bay-like to talk about than the predators that live there. And what was your reaction when you heard the news of this fatality that happened this last week?
It sadly it does happen occasionally. Sharks in general, and white sharks certainly being at the top of the food chain. High-level predators. If you go in the ocean, you might run into a shark. If you go into the woods, you might run into a mountain lion or a bear. It's just you're kind of in their element, and sadly things do take place. But I think you got to kind of put into perspective, though. She was only like the 17th fatal shark attack in California since 1950. So it's not something that happens very often.
Right, super rare. However, it gets a lot of attention. It's been written up in The Guardian, in London and all over the world. Maybe because it's so rare, but we do have a fascination. We have so very few predators in our actual lives that I think they take on extra significance, as with the movie Jaws. What kind of myths about sharks would you like to debunk, since often some of the coverage is quite sensationalistic?
Yeah, it can be sensationalistic, especially in this particular instance where, they didn't even want to call it confirm it was a shark attack at first because of the circumstances, even though some witnesses on shore said they saw a shark breach the water. But there was obviously it was almost a week before they found her body. And so they were kind of like not sure what happened, but obviously they knew something catastrophic happened because I think 14 of the 15 swimmers made it to shore, including her husband, and no, they didn't. She wasn't there, so they're trying to figure out what happened. And most of the time, like particularly with white sharks, they'll do what they call bite and spit, where they'll grab the victim and then they'll let it go. And sometimes there's kind of two theories for that. One is sometimes you're just testing something out because sharks don't have hands to manipulate things like people do. And so their way to test things out is to grab something and then let it go. Also, when they attack seals or sea lions, they'll oftentimes bite and then let go and then wait for the seal to bleed out, basically, because if they get tangled with a seal or an elephant seal, their fins have extreme claws, and they can do some damage to the shark. So oftentimes the white shark will bite and let go, and then wait for the thing to bleed out. Now, the other thing too is that sharks generally do not consume people, and so that was one of the things with this one that came up, like because there's no body for about 7 days. There was a question about if this was a shark attack, did it consume her? And the reality is, in fact, it's pretty rare for a shark to actually consume something, but consume a human. It's more they tend to bite, but the injuries can, like in this case, be catastrophic. So it's kind of, also brings closure to the family that they were able to recover her body eventually, and so they were able to determine what took place.
Do you know more about what did take place? Because the body was found in Santa Cruz County in Davenport, and she was last seen in Pacific Grove. That's a really long way.
Yeah, well, the currents, and I did talk to some of the oceanographers at Moss Landing Marine Laboratories, and what you have at this time of the year, you have what's called a Davison current, which is a reverse current that runs along the coast, the shoreline there. And so instead of going what you would be thinking it's kind of north to south, because most people thought the body would have drifted south, the current actually runs to the north at this time of the year. So after the incident took place, her body just drifted, to the north and ended up in Davenport. What was interesting, is they did, because obviously there's a lot of like Coast Guard and other personnel, rescue personnel around. They were on the scene pretty quickly. Is that they weren't able to see the body at all, really until it washed up, a week later. So that was kind of unusual. If you're in a more remote area where you don't have that type of response, you could see like maybe a person's body could drift away. But in that case, they were on the scene pretty quickly. So it kind of adds something to the mystery, is like that they weren't able to spot a body until it washed up on shore.
Right. So they'll be figuring those things out as time goes on. Apparently, the person, Erika, was still wearing her wetsuit and one of those repellent. There's a repellent shark bracelet, which I wanted to talk to you about.
Yep.
So, first of all, do humans look like seals when they're wearing these wetsuits?
I think they're I think sometimes the sharks may not be quite sure what it is, because people, your typical seals and sea lions, they have a lot of fat, a lot of blubber to keep warm in the cold water. And that's really what provides the shark with the energy, is all that fat. And people, comparatively speaking, don't have that much fat, especially someone who I believe she was a triathlete and a long distance swimmer, so she was pretty used to being pretty athletic. So it's probably, again, I think it's, and again, I'm speculating, but it's probably more of just a shark trying to figure out what it was. Misidentification. Sometimes they use. Okay, we do know white sharks will bite inanimate objects. They'll bite buoys. They'll bite just things floating in the water. They're just inanimate, and that's been witnessed and documented as well. And sometimes if you got somebody who's putting off some type of vibration in the water, like a swimmer, shark may not know what it is, but then it'll swim. It might go up and bite the person for reasons other than feeding. And
people on surfboards, that has also happened, that they've bitten their surfboards, not their legs.
Yeah. The thing on the surfboards, you can, oftentimes if a person does get bit, or the surfboard will get bitten, the person won't get bitten. So you have a little bit of protection there, versus if you're a swimmer, like she was, you're not going to, you really hope it's not a severe bite, or it hits an artery, because sometimes a bite may not be severe, but if it hits like a femoral artery or a significant artery, you can bleed out pretty quickly.
Well, let's hope it's quick and not painful.
Yeah.
So these bracelets, do they give people a false sense of protection? Because she was wearing one.
Right. Yeah. I get that question a lot, and I have a bit of history going back 35 plus years. People looking at these types of things that put up like electrical interference or something for the shark, and in my opinion, and there has been some studies that show this, that they don't really work, basically, because sharks are actually attracted. They have their sensory systems is called you see all little dots on sometimes the snout of these sharks. So it's called the ampulla lorenzini, and what they do is sharks home in on things based on frequency and vibrations and electromagnetism. And so, and each species of shark will behave differently, whether a white shark or a blue shark or a leopard shark. They'll behave differently depending by species. But what I know from them looking at these types of devices, you're putting out these kind of things, and if anything, I don't want to say it attracts them, but I don't believe it's going to have anything to do with just dissuading them at all.
Wow. So it's even possible, of course, that's speculation, because there's not been a study on it, that it might be attracting the sharks. Well,
actually, I just was at a conference in September, and there was a study that's showing, looking at shark bite victims or shark attack victims, and they found people that had these devices on, there's a slightly higher number of people had incidents with sharks than those that didn't. And this was a study in Australia and South Africa.
Wow. So if you just joined me here on Talk of the Bay, I'm speaking with Dr. David Ebert. He's a shark expert. He's with Moss Landing Marine Lab and San Jose State University. And your whole organization is all about researching sharks. And I know we have a number of them in the Bay. When a mountain lion, for example, kills someone, which is also extremely rare, often it's hunted down and killed. Does that happen in the sense of when a shark kills someone?
Yeah, they've had it. It's kind of controversial because around the world. And I study sharks all over the world, and if you look at people, with these shark things that it's like with a mountain lion or even like a crocodile or a bear or something. You can go out and determine if that shark or excuse me, if that mountain lion consumed or had something to do with that person's injury. With sharks, it's very different because they live in a the watery environment, and there's plenty of white sharks out here in the bay. So the chance if you went out to try to cull a white shark that might have been involved in this incident, the chances you would get that shark, I think, are extremely remote.
It seems like our relationship to sharks has gone through a number of different permutations from back when Jaws came out, which had such a huge impact that Peter Benchley, who wrote the book that the movie was based on, went about trying to talk about shark conservation because people were just killing them right and left and treating them as like an imminent danger after that movie. And it seems like through Shark Week, maybe we raised some consciousness or maybe we didn't. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I have a little, that's a very, and what you said is very common. That's a common thought. And Peter Benchley did have that, he really got very involved in the conservation later on. But I was, aging myself, but I was in high school when the Jaws movie came out in 1975. And I grew up here in the Monterey area, so I've been in the water since I was like 8 years old. Started diving at Lover's Cove there when I was 8, so I'm pretty familiar with. So I grew up in the water. But the thing is shark culling and shark fishing was going on long before Jaws came out. And when the movie came out, what it did is it raised awareness. And there was no doubt. I haven't grown up around here, the late 70s, 80s. Shark attacks, which used to, maybe garner a day's worth of media attention, suddenly became, pretty big news every time it'd become like a sensational thing every time there would be an attack for a number of years. And so in that sense, it basically, his book and the movie raised awareness of sharks and I might point out like things like shark finning and shark fisheries and culling, all this stuff was going on before the movie came out. And the thing I look at too is that after the movie came out, people got more. There was a positive thing to it, is that people got interested in sharks and they started asking a lot of questions like, well, how many species of sharks are there? How old do sharks get? Where do they move to? Because shark research before 1975 basically consisted of shark attacks. It was funded by the Office of Naval Research out from World War II. And so they would go out and they would just basically, try to come up with ways to prevent shark attack. Well, after Jaws came out and starting really in the early 1980s, kind of about the time I started graduate school, we started it basically laid the foundation for modern shark research. And when Peter Benchley got interested in conservation, that was right when the whole conservation movement was really kind of starting in the early 90s, because there was no field of shark conservation. There really wasn't a modern shark research. It was just really starting in the 80s. And so that all really kind of kicked more into gear with the conservation more in the 90s. And so he was kind of a bit early on with that. But again, it kind of raised awareness of stuff that was already going on.
So in the sense that you're talking about, that conservation became more of a effort to at least measure the populations and see if they were going up or down. How have we done? I mean, I wouldn't be able to tell you whether they're doing well or poorly, but you probably could tell us.
Yeah, we can actually, actually in California, actually on the Pacific coast here, we've actually done a lot of good stuff. We have, I think white shark populations are probably at record numbers along the coast here. I can go up and, I go up and look and do surveys in a helicopter once in a while. And you go over by like the Cement Boat area, New Brighton and Seacliff and that area. I'll literally count like 30, 40 white sharks over a few mile stretch of beach. And they're mostly young of the year, which tells you that the populations must be really healthy and that they're breeding. And the nursery area for these sharks used to mostly be exclusively Southern California, south of Santa Barbara. But since about 2014, the populations expanded of the nursery areas into Monterey Bay. And so we've actually had a very good positive stuff in terms of shark conservation here on the West Coast. And I think that's something that people don't think about. And that, we've actually should, kind of take a bit of we've done something good in terms of shark conservation here.
Unless you're a swimmer in Rio Del Mar Beach. And I wanted to ask you, a friend of mine used to swim there all the time, and he stopped when he saw those aerial drone footage of all the young sharks just hanging out there. Then I read that they're too young to bother with people. Is that true?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Okay, just so you know, my theory is I'm about 6 foot. If the shark's like as big as me or bigger, I usually try to give it a wide berth and get out of the water, regardless of the species.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly white sharks, these are 6 to 8 footers, and they generally tend to eat fish. They don't start to change until they get about 10 feet long. That's when they tend to shift their diet, starting to feed on more like marine mammals. And so the smaller ones you're seeing, again, they're more fish feeders. Again, a 7 foot shark could do damage, but they're just really not into the feeding on marine mammals yet. And if you look at everybody knows about like sort of the big, broad, triangular teeth of white sharks. Well, when they're under 10 foot and under, their teeth are actually very narrow. They're more designed for fish. And it's only when they reach about 10 to 12 feet the teeth broadens out and they get more of that triangular shape that you think about. And that's because their diet shifts more to marine mammals.
Well, Dr. Ebert, when you think about these sharks that, this one did damage to someone enough to kill them, and they are increasing in number, is there anything people should do differently around them? Like you said, give it a wide berth if you see an 8-foot shark. Do you think it means, for a little while anyway, as long as this story is going through the media, that people will stay out of the water?
Well, I think a thing to put in perspective, and I use these numbers, is that since 1950 throughout the end of 2025, so over that 76-year period or so, there's been there's on average been about 3 to 4 shark incidents a year, and the population of California from 1950 to now has gone up from about 15 million to 40 million, and people have been in the water, a lot more activities now, with stand-up paddleboarding and other activities, kite surfing and other things that they weren't doing years ago. So you have more people in the water, but yet the number of incidents has not really increased. It's still about 3 to 4 incidents a year. And again, some years you might have as many as, we've had as many as 9 or 10 some years. I think this year, 2025, was a high year. We were up about 9 or 10 incidents. But some years you'll have 0 or 1 incident.
And you compare that to the number of people who probably die from bee stings, and it's quite outnumbering them. And I guess I could make a comment about otters, like maybe they took over the biting business from the sharks, and now the sea otters are the ones biting surfboards. I don't know.
Well, I have a few comments on otters. Haven't been around the ocean and seen them a lot. I probably keep to myself for now. But
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
They're the otters. They're really cute and look cuddly to take pictures of, but if you're a diver or in the water, or kayaking or surfing, they're kind of nasty little critters.
They're aggressive, aren't they? Yeah, I've seen people be followed in Elkhorn Slough, like on a kayak, and having them jump onto the kayak.
Oh yeah. They're kind of like they are a weasel type of weasel, but they're not as cuddly as they look when you see them kind of wrapped in the kelp. They're
like a teddy bear with giant fangs.
I like that one. That's good description.
Keep your distance. Yeah. Well, we have to learn about the ocean in order to respect and preserve it and know more about it. And you're helping us learn a lot today. I really appreciate it. I'm speaking with Dr. David Ebert, and he is a shark expert from Moss Landing Marine Lab. What are some exciting areas of research that you're just now uncovering in your shark research?
Well, a lot of stuff I'm really focused in on, because white sharks, believe it or not, they receive a lot of attention. They probably are the most protected species in the world now. And but I focus on what I call lost sharks, and these are species that people don't even think about, and they tend to be lower trophic level than the white sharks. And like if I ask people like how many shark species do you think there are, most, like if I'm talking to a general audience, they might say 20 or 30. They don't realize there's 1,300 species of sharks around the world.
I did not know that either.
Yeah, and outside a handful of the more dangerous ones, like a white shark or a tiger shark or a bull shark, most people don't know there's so many species out there. Most sharks are less than 6 feet long, and in fact, about 50% of them don't get more than about 3 feet. So again, they're at a lower trophic level, but the reason I call these lost sharks is because in many areas of the world, California's done a really good job. We should pat ourselves on the back for what we've done here. But in a lot of areas of the world, these other species are disappearing. In fact, some have vanished over the last several decades, and we don't even know about that. And yet these lost sharks will tell you more about the health of the marine environment than the white shark will.
Is it because people are eating them, or their prey is going away?
Yeah. I think it's in a lot of places, and again, a lot of these tend to be very poor countries I travel to, They have a lot of malnutrition, so anything they catch, they pretty much gets eaten. And in a lot of those cases, you have more, say, desirable fish, species, edible fish, bony fishes they might eat, have disappeared for overfishing, habitat degradation, and so the sharks and rays get targeted. And a lot of them, because of their life history, they tend to be long-lived, slow-growing, and just have a few young. A lot of those populations have declined. And in some of those areas, I try to travel these areas. And I try to get on the ground and figure out what's going on in the area, because every place is going to be a little different. I was just in Madagascar a few months ago, and it's one of the poorest countries in the world. You can't really go in there and tell people well, don't eat that shark, because food security is huge in these countries, and like I say, malnutrition is 50% of the population. I just try to provide information and then let the people, in this case, the Malagasys and other countries I go to, they're going to have to make their decisions on how they want to, develop any kind of management or conservation policies. I just try to provide the information for them to do. But so it's a difficult situation. Here in California, you can go out to the store, you've got all kinds of options to eat. Whereas in a lot of countries you don't.
Right, right. So in some countries on land, when there's a big predator, they try to convince people not to kill them so that they can develop tourism. But I imagine shark tourism is maybe far down the list of their concerns at this point, but perhaps could be something developed where they send the person down in a cage and they get to look out from a safe distance.
Yeah, it really depends. It is a whole hour talk, but it really depends what's going on in terms of, because each country has its own set of countries. And again, I'm talking about fairly poor countries that don't have, food security is a huge issue. Right. And so each one's going to be a little different. So that's why I just try to provide information, like what species they have, what's there, and then a lot of times just species that they haven't seen for decades. Those are things I start looking at and say here's this thing that used to occur here, but we know it doesn't occur here. And then try to figure out what's going on, why it's disappeared. Is it fishing or is it habitat? In some cases, a lot of these species are coastal species, and sometimes it can be habitat degradation as well. So there can be other potential factors.
Talk a little bit about, in the few minutes we have left, about the importance of what they call apex predators, because I've learned a little bit about when wolves came back to Yellowstone, it kind of invigorated the entire ecosystem. Do these top predator sharks do that for the ocean ecosystem?
Yeah, well, I think what the reason you're seeing so many white sharks here is it was a combination thing. The first thing you had in the mid-'70s, you had the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and anybody that's been around the coastal areas here in California, you don't have to look too hard down, if you're going out of the harbor, the pier, the wharfs or something. There's sea lions everywhere. Yeah. And so where we have sea lions, we have gray whales, sea otters. Some of these things are like the highest recorded populations in recent memory. And so, and because sea lions tend to be preferred prey for large white sharks, it only follows you're having an increase in the white shark population. Also in California in 1994, they passed the legislation to protect the white shark in California, which helped a little bit. But I think it was probably, if you ask me between the two, I think it was the Marine Mammal Protection Act probably had a bigger impact on that.
And the fisher people who were complaining about the sea lions should love that there's somebody eating them, right? Oh yeah.
Well, if I got a quick story here, I was working on my PhD in South Africa, and they were the first country in the world to develop a conservation policy for a white shark, which was for any shark, and I was actually involved with that. And it was driven by the fishing industry, wanted to protect the white sharks so they would eat more of the Cape fur seals, which are eating all the commercially valuable fish. And that's really where the whole conservation movement started with white sharks, was with that in South Africa. And then Australia implemented a policy in 1993, and then I'd say California was the third place to do it in 1994. So it's kind of snowballed after that.
It's really a chain reaction, and we are part of that chain, and we don't want to become like one of the sea lions, of course. But You've taught us a lot about how we are really not their preferred prey at all. No. And it's only when they make a mistake do we suffer the consequence, as we have seen this last week. Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing your knowledge of sharks. I learned a lot. I hope our listeners did too. And if you missed our whole interview here, you can find us on the archive section of our website at ksqd.org. I've been speaking with Dr. David Ebert of Moss Landing Marine Lab. Thank you so much for being here with us on Talk of the Bay. I really appreciate your time.
Great. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. I'm Rachel Ann Goodman. Thank you for tuning in this afternoon and evening. We'll be back again next week with another great show. Coming up next, it's Ask Dr. Dawn, but first, it's time for First Person Singular. This is K-Squid, KSQD Santa Cruz, KSQT Prunedale.